that feeling? You stand up a little too fast, and for a second, the world just tilts, it goes fuzzy. Well, that sudden, disorienting feeling is exactly what we're mapping out today. We're going to navigate the common but surprisingly complex world of dizziness, charting a course from just understanding the sensation to knowing what to do about it. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to figure out what dizziness really means, because how it feels is a massive clue. Then, we'll dive into the main systems that can cause it: your circulation, your body's fuel and water levels, and even your brain. We'll also check out some external triggers like medications before we get to the most important part: what you can actually do about it. Okay, first things first, we have to get specific. See, we all use the word dizzy to describe a bunch of different things, but nailing down the exact sensation you're feeling is one of the most important first steps to figuring out what's going on. The differences are everything. So, at its most basic, dizziness is just a catch-all term, right? It's that general feeling of being unsteady, a bit woozy, maybe weak. It's when your sense of stability just feels off. But that's too broad. We need to break it down into two very different feelings. And this, right here, is probably the single most important distinction to make. On one hand, you've got lightheadedness. That's the feeling that you're about to faint. The world isn't moving, you just feel weak, like you might pass out. On the other hand, there's vertigo. Now, this is totally different. Vertigo is that powerful, unmistakable sensation that you or the room around you is literally spinning. Getting this right is the first big clue. Okay, so keeping that difference in mind, let's focus on that lightheaded, about to faint feeling first. One of the most common reasons for it has to do with your circulatory system, that incredible network that's constantly managing blood flow and, as a result, your sense of balance. We've all been there, right? You jump out of bed or stand up from your chair, and for a second, whoa, you get that head rush, you feel a little unsteady. Well, that little moment is a perfect, everyday example of how the flow of blood to your brain has a direct impact on your stability. So what is actually happening in that moment? It's a process with a fancy name: orthostatic hypotension. Here's the deal. When you stand up, gravity instantly pulls about 800 milliliters of blood down into your legs. Your body is smart, though. Sensors in your arteries immediately detect this drop in blood pressure. So, in a healthy response, your nervous system tells your heart to beat faster and your blood vessels to squeeze, pushing that blood right back up to your brain. But if that response is a little slow, your blood pressure stays low for a few seconds, your brain is briefly starved of oxygen, and boom, you feel dizzy. And this really shows what a delicate balancing act blood pressure is. It's not just about it being too low. The interesting thing is, the very medications people take for high blood pressure can sometimes push things too far the other way, causing that exact same dizzy feeling. It's all about keeping that flow to the brain perfectly steady. Now, it's not always just about standing up too fast. Dizziness can also be a sign of more serious issues with the heart or your blood. Things like an irregular heartbeat or maybe poor blood flow from hardened arteries. In really critical cases, it can even be a warning sign of a heart attack or stroke. And sometimes the problem is with the blood itself, like with anemia, which means you just don't have enough healthy red blood cells to carry oxygen to your brain. Okay, so let's shift gears and look at another really fundamental cause of dizziness. Think of your body like a high-performance engine. It needs the right resources to run properly. So what happens when it's running low on the basics, like water and sugar? Dehydration is a huge one. When you're low on fluids, the actual volume of your blood goes down. That means lower blood pressure and, you guessed it, less oxygen getting to your brain. But it's more than that. Being dehydrated also messes with your electrolytes, things like sodium and potassium that your nerves need to send signals correctly. And at this, it can even directly affect the fluid levels in your inner ear, which is basically your body's personal balance system. The other key resource is fuel. We're talking about blood sugar, or glucose. Your brain is an absolute energy hog. It runs on glucose. So when your blood sugar drops too low, a condition called hypoglycemia, your brain is starved of its main power source. It's just like a car sputtering and stalling when it runs out of gas. That's why low blood sugar can cause not just dizziness, but also weakness and confusion. So, we've talked about the body's plumbing and its fuel tank. But what happens when the problem is with the command center itself? Let's take a look at how your brain, your nerves, and your senses can actually create the feeling of dizziness. Now, this is so important to understand. Sometimes dizziness isn't caused by what we think of as a physical illness at all. It can be a powerful response from your brain to stress or anxiety. When you get anxious, your brain can flip that fight or flight switch, and that causes a cascade of very real, very physical symptoms. And dizziness is a big one. So how does anxiety physically make you dizzy? Well, a few things happen. First, you might start to breathe really fast or hyperventilate. That actually lowers the carbon dioxide in your blood, which in turn causes the blood vessels go into your brain to get narrower. Second, in that fight or flight mode, your body sends more blood to your big muscles so you can run. The trade-off? Less blood for your brain. And finally, when you're anxious, your muscles get tense, especially in your neck, which can literally squeeze on blood vessels and interfere with balance signals. And then, of course, there are direct physical problems with the brain and senses. This is where vertigo, that true spinning feeling, often shows up. A lot of times, it's an issue with the inner ear, your body's internal gyroscope. Conditions like BPV, where tiny little crystals in your ear get knocked out of place, are a classic cause. On top of that, neurological conditions like Parkinson's or MS can mess with the nerve pathways that are essential for processing balance, leading to that feeling of unsteadiness. All right, so far we've looked at causes from the inside. Now let's look at triggers that come from the outside in. The source of your dizziness might not be an internal process at all, but something you're putting into your body or being exposed to in your environment. And look at this number. It's pretty staggering. Dizziness affects up to 30% of people. It's one of the most common reasons people go to the doctor. And a lot of the time, a potential cause is hiding in plain sight, right inside the medicine cabinet. Wow, yeah, this slide is pretty eye-opening. You can see some really common categories here. We've got medicines that directly affect your blood pressure, which makes sense. Then you have things like antidepressants that change your brain chemistry, and others that work on your central nervous system, like pain meds and sedatives. The list is huge, and it's a really important thing to talk about with a doctor. And of course, it's not just prescription meds. You have to think about other triggers too. Are you sick with the flu? Have you had any alcohol? Were you just out in the heat for a long time? And in some very rare but very serious cases, it could even be something in your environment, like carbon monoxide. Okay, so we've mapped out the what and the why. Now for the most important part of this whole thing. What do you do about it? When is dizziness something you can just shake off, and when is it a sign you need to get help? And this is the critical question. Because while most dizzy spells are temporary and not a big deal, sometimes, and you absolutely need to know when, dizziness can be a warning sign of a very serious medical event, like a stroke or a heart attack. Please pay close attention to this slide. These are the emergency red flags. If your dizziness happens along with any of these other symptoms, a sudden, terrible headache, chest pain, slurred speech, a droopy face, weakness on one side of your body, vision changes, fainting, or you just can't stop vomiting, do not wait. That's a medical emergency. You need to get help immediately. In the end, it really all comes down to listening to your body. You know, a little lightheadedness now and then from standing up too fast is probably fine. But if your dizziness is happening a lot, if it's severe, if it lasts a long time, or you just can't figure out why it's happening, it's time to see a doctor. They can help you investigate the root cause, whether it's your heart, your meds, or your inner ear. And that's how you navigate your own map from sensation to solution. The question isn't just, why am I dizzy? It's, what is my body trying to tell me?